This is Street Knowledge with Chris Graham.
Welcome to the podcast. Chris Graham. We're going to talk pro wrestling on this podcast. It's been a while since we've done a wrestling podcast. We're going to try to do more regular pro wrestling podcasts, though, here now that we're getting into, well, it's a good time of year. We just finished up SummerSlam, heading into All In, and we've got Survivor Series coming up in a couple months. Actually, Hell in a Cell coming back here in a few weeks. And, all the way to Royal Rumble, WrestleMania season. So we're kind of through the slow part of the wrestling year. Gosh, New Japan, a few months away now that the G1 Climax is wrapped up. We're looking forward to a fall walk-up towards Wrestle Kingdom. There's just so much going on in pro wrestling. And a good time to get us kind of back in motion here. And so first, we're going to talk SummerSlam. We're going to review the SummerSlam WWE monthly event from this past weekend. Actually, we'll talk NXT as well. And starting with SummerSlam and the main event. That's where you got to start. The storyline playing out over the last 3.5 years. The Roman Reigns-Brock Lesnar storyline. Roman Reigns had a brief run with the title, very brief run with the title, back between, 2016, 2017, I think it was. That very short run where he eventually lost the title at the Royal Rumble, kind of the screw job kind of finish there. But by and large, all from back to WrestleMania 31 until SummerSlam Sunday night, the dominant story in WWE was could Roman Reigns beat Brock Lesnar? And he finally did at the end of SummerSlam. And interesting move by WWE to deal with this odd problem I've written about a few times on Augusta Free Press, about how fans, for whatever reason, have decided they don't like Roman Reigns. I think it dates back to WrestleMania 31, even the Royal Rumble leading into WrestleMania 31, when fans wanted Daniel Bryan to win the Rumble and challenge Lesnar, and Roman Reigns won, and the Chosen One. The fans didn't like the idea of a Chosen One, and since then there's been boos from half the crowd, the other half of the crowd cheering Roman Reigns, but that's not good for the face of your company, right? The guy moving all the merchandise, the guy that's the main event of your house shows, your Raw house shows at least. And so, that's been a problem. And so the way WWE dealt with that was, a lot of us I presumed that the way WWE would deal with this would be to, kind of Daniel Bryan it. If you remember, there was that same issue with Daniel Bryan a few years ago leading into WrestleMania 30. And Bryan won the championship, I think it was SummerSlam, the summer before, and had it taken away quickly with a Money in the Bank briefcase cash in and screw job there with Triple H. The Authority storyline played out. It was actually really good writing that led to a really historic win for Bryan at WrestleMania 30 the next year. And so the thinking was by me and a lot of others that, hey, Roman Reigns can beat Lesnar, finally get over that hurdle, but then Braun Strowman will come in, cash the briefcase in, and he'll win the championship, and that'll set up a storyline between Strowman and Reigns that will play out for the next several months, maybe even the WrestleMania season next year. And so WWE played off of what we all thought was going to be the story. This is really good writing, I thought, for two reasons. We all thought this was going to be the case anyway, so what WWE did was had Strowman come out, played his music, had him come out at the start of the match, actually even before the match started, and say, I'm going to cash in. Whoever wins, I'm going to challenge you tonight. And so, of course, then the fans are hyped. Hey, this is going to happen. And the match was a pretty short match between Lesnar and Reigns. In fact, Lesnar turned his attention, did more to Strowman, a lot more to Strowman than he did to Roman Reigns. F5'd him on the floor. He hit him with a chair. And then walks in the ring with a chair. Reigns hits him with a spear, one of a million spears he's given Brock Lesnar over the years. But this is the first one in the match, the first and only one in the match. He gets the 3 count with the only spear he hits in the match. And so then you're left as a fan to think, all right, well, Strowman said he's going to challenge, and he's going to come back in with a briefcase and challenge Reigns. But the way the story played out, Lesnar had done enough damage with the F5, the chair shot, and actually sidestepping Roman Reigns as he was doing a through-the-ropes dive, and that landed on Strowman. And then plus Lesnar threw the briefcase back to the Titantron. And so the show goes off the air for us at home. Credits roll, and it's over. For the live crowd, at least it shut them up enough because the live crowd doesn't see the credits rolling, so the crowd isn't able to shower the boos on Reigns, and they would have. The Brooklyn crowd would have. The Brooklyn crowd on Sunday night also lustily cheered the heel turn of in the Charlotte match. Why am I forgetting her name? Why am I forgetting the name of the female star? That the last kicker. Why am I forgetting her name? This is embarrassing. Becky Lynch, of course. Gosh, my brain cramp here on a Wednesday afternoon. Heat getting to me, I guess. But they cheered the heel turn and continued to cheer the heel turn on SmackDown Live Tuesday night. So, that didn't go according to plan. And then also the episode with Samoa Joe and AJ Styles, the sort of personal storyline they're injecting there, where Joe is invoking AJ Styles' family into the storyline, and actually, the crowd buying into the heels speech about the family and who's your daddy chant. The crowd not helping. The crowd going into business for themselves, as Jim Ross would say. Not helping advance the storyline from WWE's perspective. They're not playing along the way they should. So, so WWE, at least in this case, kept the crowd from underselling the title change and the historic nature of it. And so, they kept the heat off of Reigns and set up the future. And then we see, writing at WWE has gotten a lot better in the last few weeks. This is why I'm excited to be talking wrestling again. Because Monday night, you had Reigns come out, and this is where, getting the belt off of Lesnar, who only would appear a few times a year, not even wrestle, but just appear a few times a year on Raw, was draining that show of energy, of intrigue, of interest. Reigns comes out, first thing he does is say, I'm going to defend the belt tonight against Finn Balor. And that's exciting, the idea that there's a fighting champion again. If you're going to have a belt, let's not have the IC belt, the Intercontinental belt be your best belt on the show. SmackDown has AJ Styles appearing regularly and defending his belt regularly on Tuesday nights. Tonight it looks like Reigns is going to be a guy who's going to defend regularly on Monday nights. First night out, he defends against Finn Balor, wins the match, and then you have Strowman come out again, and again the crowd's popping. Hey, Strowman's going to cash in. In fact, does hand the briefcase to the referee and say he's going to cash in. But then the Shield comes down. When I say the Shield, I'm talking about Seth Rollins and Dean Ambrose, not in their usual attire for Seth Rollins and Dean Ambrose, but in their Shield attire for back in the day. And the crowd pops like crazy again. Now we don't know where it's going to go because the Shield prevents the cash in. The bell never rang, so Strowman still has the briefcase, and does the Shield powerbomb on a table, and now you've got a couple of competing forces. Now things get interesting because now you've got it's pretty clear that the Reigns Strowman storyline is going to play out. I would hope all the way to WrestleMania. So now we've got our storyline for the year set, at least for the next 7 or 8 months set, and you've got competing forces. You've got the Shield back on one side. Now that Ambrose is back from his injury, his 9 months of rehab, and you've got Strowman on the other. And it doesn't matter in this case. We're not quite there, but we're almost post face heel in this day and age in WWE and pro wrestling in general. And it doesn't matter who's the face, who's the heel here. Both sides have their fans. I don't know that Strowman has too many detractors, but pairing Reigns with his other Shield mates, as was done before Ambrose went down to injury, is a way to put some more steam behind Reigns and his title reign and make him the face as much as possible of the company. So things are getting interesting there, and it was well played out Sunday night, well done on Monday, and so now WWE has somewhere to go with this. Should be fun to see how this goes. And so good work on WWE's part, taking a situation that could have been bad and turning it into a good situation. More highs and lows from SummerSlam specifically. Excuse me for the cough. Ronda Rousey elevated. She finally wins the women's title on Raw. Squashes Alexa Bliss in a sick. Boy, that armbar was. I was actually watching with the live live viewing. A few folks over here at the palatial estate / AFB office, as I like to say, and I was talking during that match, as brief as it was, about how we had to remember that Bliss is double jointed. I can't remember which match it was last year where she played that angle out, double jointing. She can bend her elbow both ways, and it's just hard to watch. But she did it in a match last year, and as I was talking about her double jointed nature and talking, that could really lead to a interesting armbar from Ronda Rousey if they wanted to use that angle again. They used the angle, and boy, oh my God, it was just hard to watch. And then the replay, but it really sold the armbar well as a result. And but Rousey essentially winning that in a squash. I'm not sure if Bliss got any offense in, but that's the way you should book Ronda Rousey. That's how I wrote her, in my preview of SummerSlam, that you should really have Rousey come out, play the badass Rousey, not the smiling, the big grin on her face Rousey that we've seen from time to time. She should come out looking like the UFC main event Rousey, where she came out and just stalked the ring, had a look on her face like she had just eaten some bad eggs, and then kicks ass, and that's what she did. And I've listened to Jim Ross's great interview of Ric Flair on his show last week. If you haven't listened to that, go to your podcast app and download the Ross show and that one specifically. It's a long interview, but man, it was good. And in addition to getting Flair's thoughts on just the general state of wrestling, a lot of talk about the old days, a lot of talk about WWE, particularly involving his daughter Charlotte, actually as her real name. And the two of them talking about how it only makes sense, and hopefully WWE does this. They're the champs of the two shows. Charlotte is the SmackDown Women's Champ, and Rousey is the Raw Women's Champ. I've been an advocate for a long time. I'd love to see the women have their own show. I don't think it's in the cards, but they're having their own pay-per-view at least. I think the women could have their own 2-hour weekly show very easily. And I'd love to see a unified women's title. Have one women's champion, and have them sort of sell that. You could have that unification match at WrestleMania next year, champ versus champ. I mean, we're a long way away from that, so I don't know if WWE would want to keep the belts on the women that long, but I think you should, and I think that would be an awesome match. And you wouldn't have to then have the badass, Ronda Rousey who wins matches in 2 minutes. You could have, because she's shown glimpses of what she can do outside of just what she did in UFC, where she would just, bulldoze through her opponents in a few seconds. She's shown that she can really work a match. Her WrestleMania match, which was her first match, her Raw match a couple weeks ago, first TV match a couple weeks ago. She can work some matches. She can do moves. She can sell her opponent's offense. And Charlotte, of course, is she's non-pariah as far as that goes in the women's game. And I think I might agree with Ric Flair. She might be the best athlete, man or woman, in WWE right now with what she can do from gymnastics, using her gymnastics background, her strength in the women's division. She's got the combination of aerial and ground that's really unmatched on either roster, either gender. You could sell that match if you keep them both undefeated, which is hard to do. But if you can keep them both undefeated, especially because Charlotte's going to be working this program with Becky Lynch. But if you could do that, build up the lengthy undefeated streak between the two, and eventually get them to rival each other, maybe the women's Royal Rumble. One or the other could win and challenge the other. I mean, I don't know how that would work, but I'd love to see that. We'll see if it comes to play. I thought the match of the night at SummerSlam was AJ Styles Samoa Joe. I don't think I'm really going out on a limb there either. I think if you watch the show, you might agree. It wasn't going to be the main event. It didn't have the biggest build-up. Now, though, it's going to have some build-up for the next few months, I would say. The way that ended, I thought was great. A friend of mine, Brian Gokenauer, who I've talked about on podcast previously, how I'd love to be sort of co-host or regular guest on this podcast for wrestling. He texted me and said, "I hated that finish, DQ finish, but I hated that." And actually, I saw it. I mean, I right away said, "Great finish," because what that means is we're going to see this more often. We're going to see this feud extend for a while. Same as the Daniel Bryan Miz, which I'll get into in a couple of minutes. But if you had either guy go over in this match, and of course, I think WWE wants to keep the belt on AJ Styles for a while longer. The WWE title, the SmackDown Championship, if you want to call it. He would have had to have gotten a fall on Joe, and even a controversial fall. Somehow, of course, a face can't win by too much controversy and still be a face. But a fall would diminish any rematch opportunities or need for a rematch if that's the case. But so Joe winning by disqualification because Styles goes batshit crazy over Joe invoking his family and talking about who's your daddy and that kind of thing. All that does is mean we're going to get more of these matches. That was a great match, played out well. Psychology was great, and we knew it was going to be. They worked in TNA. We knew it was going to be a great match between these two. Their styles meshed so well together. AJ, the small guy versus big guy, with Joe being the big guy, but Joe also being a big guy who can move, and Styles, of course, can work with anybody and make them look good. They're both the guys who can work with anybody and make them look good. So when they work together, it's just elevated. So yeah, I think that's a great thing. I think it's just going to be awesome for the next few months to see those guys duking it out on SmackDown. I imagine Styles probably retains at the end of this feud, but I wouldn't be disappointed if Joe ends up with the belt at some point back in this, and maybe they traded the belt back. Joe wins it, holds it for a month or two. Styles eventually comes out in the end with the belt, but I'd love to see them just play out for the next few months. If that's the case, in the fall and the winter, we get Styles versus Joe. SmackDown is going to be in good shape. I talked about Daniel Bryan Miz. The finish there, a long match. The fans, for some reason, weren't into it. I don't know. I kind of felt the same thing. Again, Brian Gogauer texted me and said, "Wow, the crowd is just not popping for this. What's going on?" What's weird is watching the show that night, I was kind of zoning out a little bit, and I was into the match from a technical standpoint, but maybe they gave him too much time for this match, especially particularly given the finish. The finish with the Miz being handed a foreign object, brass knuckles, by his wife Maurice, and knocking Bryan out with it and getting the tainted pinfall. But what that means is, because there was no clean fall, in this case there's no championship on the line, so no big deal as far as that goes. But the tainted fall for Miz just means we get more of Daniel Bryan Miz, which I will like. The mic work they both do will lend itself to a good fall-winter feud between these two guys, and so I think that's going to be a good thing for WWE to have these guys at each other's throats as far as that goes. So then a couple of questions. Actually, these are more NXT-related questions, and it kind of goes back to the Takeover Brooklyn show on Saturday night, which was an awesome show. So among the matches, maybe the match of the night, and certainly I think all the matches could have been matches of the night, but the Adam Cole match with Ricochet. Ricochet wins the North American Championship, which leads to the question, what should WWE do next with Adam Cole? And so I got to listen to the Busted Open show as I was driving. Outside of my work with AFP, I'm also a ESPN and ESPN Plus announcer for college sports, and I was driving down to my first soccer game of the year on Monday and listened to the Busted Open show as I was on my drive to my job there. And I love the show. Busted Open, first off, just love the show. Dave LaGreca and Bully Ray was the co-host on Monday. They had a long discussion about Adam Cole, and their discussion was, what can WWE do next to Adam Cole? And it was, I was already thinking along these lines too. So what was interesting was a listener initiated this part of the discussion with he should be elevated to the main roster. Cole is, now that he's lost the belt, he doesn't have the belt anymore. He should be on the main roster. And both LaGreca and Bully Ray seem to think, there's no place for him on the main roster. And the reasoning being, they said, because the listener made the point, hey, have him walk into a program with Nakamura for the U.S. belt. Nakamura doesn't have a dance partner. Now that he's vanquished Jeff Hardy and Hardy's now working a program with Randy Orton, Nakamura could use a dance partner. Well, they said you can't just put him into a title picture because that doesn't happen in WWE. Well, it does. I'll make this point. Bobby Roode, when he left NXT, was taken to the main roster after he lost the NXT main belt. He was thrust immediately into U.S. title picture. U.S. title was then on SmackDown. Now he's on Raw, but he was immediately thrown into the U.S. title picture. Finn Balor, also a former NXT champion, he was elevated to the main roster. He was on Raw, and he walked right away into not just the mid card title picture, but he was the first Universal champion. Had to relinquish the belt after just one day because of the injury, except for during that match with Seth Rollins to win the belt. But those are two examples of guys who walked right into a title picture. And I'm not talking about, hey, Adam Cole should be challenging Roman Reigns on a more than one-off basis, or even should be injected into the mix right now on SmackDown because of the great storyline going between AJ Styles and Samoa Joe. But for a mid-card title, yeah, I think he should get an opportunity. And then you look at look back at Raw. Seth Rollins is the champ, the IC champ there. So no, right now the storyline Shield and Strowman. Maybe it makes sense that Strowman gets a program with Rollins, sort of as a gatekeeper for Reigns, as part of that bigger feud. But Nakamura again on the other side. I mean, I could see Cole and Nakamura having they would have good matches. We know that. There's a given. You put those two in a ring together, it's going to be good. And I think also, you give Adam Cole a microphone, and that's going to be a good situation for WWE, just selling the possibility of Cole and Nakamura eventually matching up. Nakamura now being a heel, you bring in. Cole's a much better heel than he is a face, but right now he's so over with fans. That was something that LaGreca said that made no sense to me. He's not known well enough in the WWE universe. If you watch the NXT show, the TakeOver show, the biggest pop of the night was for his Adam Cole Bebe at the beginning of the match. That was the loudest I heard the crowd all night long. Now, and if you want to argue that, well, NXT fans aren't WWE Universe fans, well, that show was sold out. There were 16,000 people at the TakeOver Brooklyn show. So, yes, we're not talking about 300 people at Full Sail University. We're talking about the Barclays Center full of people. And so, yes, he's over with the universe. He's as over as Finn Balor was. He's as over as Bobby Roode was. And so then the other argument, I think, again, from LaGreca, who, again, I respect the hell out of, was, well, there's nothing for him to do, so they should just leave him in NXT. If you don't think there's anything for him to do, and that's why you would leave him, and one, I think there is something for him to do, but even if you think there's nothing for him to do at the main roster, just leave him in NXT, there's nothing for him to do in NXT. So why do you have these guys? If you can't find anything for Adam Cole to do, as talented as he is, former ROH champion, now former NXT North American champion, awesome skills on the mic, great skills in the ring, his background in New Japan, if you can't find anything for him to do, all this talk about we're going to go get the Young Bucks and we're going to go get Kenny Omega, why would you even go for those guys, and why would those guys want to come to you? Why sign Matt Riddle? Why sign guys if you don't have enough to do for your current guys? And this is a partly valid argument. They haven't used Bobby Roode well. Bobby Roode is a great heel. He was a great heel in TNA, an even better heel in NXT. They bring him up to the main roster and make him a face, and now he's feud with Mojo Rawley. I agree. That's stupid. That's dumb. That's terrible booking. That's not Bobby Roode's fault. Finn Balor's been an afterthought since he came back from his injury after being made the first Universal Champion. He's not been used very well. That's not Finn Balor's fault. That's creative's fault. Find something better for him to do. But if you've already got too many people, if you think you've already got too many people to manage at the Raw and SmackDown levels now, and you think you're going to find a place, you think you're going to lure Kenny Omega from New Japan, I look at this situation, if I'm Omega, I look at how Nakamura is being booked, I look at Roode, and I look at Finn Balor and how they're being booked. it's going to take a guaranteed contract with lots of zeros on the end of it for me to sign to go to WWE, because the first thing I would think is if they're not going to give me a lot of money, man, give me anything more than an upside guarantee in the hundreds of thousands range, not in the millions range. I'm going to think, well, they're going to book me, they're going to sign me, and then they're not going to use me. They're basically giving me a contract so that New Japan can't use me, and I'm going to spend my last few productive years hanging out at the bottom of SmackDown, bottom of Raw, top of NXT, instead of putting on more 6 and 7 star matches in New Japan for a lot of money there too, and a much better work schedule as far as that goes from a travel standpoint. Why would I do that? If I'm the Young Bucks, same thing. Are they going to sign us and then do what they did to the Hardys and put us on different brands? No. I mean, if that's the case, and you can't do anything with Adam Cole, what can you do with Omega and the Bucks? So I think that's an important question for WWE to answer. And I think the Adam Cole question is an important one. I think it's a turning point for WWE. If these rumors, and I get these, my friend Brian texts me all the time, taunting me almost. Oh yeah, well, WWE really wants Omega, really wants the Bucks, because he knows I want them to stay in Japan for their sake and for wrestling's sake, for my sake as a fan. I want to see them continue to put on the great matches they put on there instead of half-ass matches in WWE. But if Triple H really wants them, he's got to be able to figure out what he can do with them, and he's got to figure out what he can do with Finn Balor and Bobby Roode and Shinsuke Nakamura and Adam Cole. And if he can't figure that out, then it's pointless to say that they need more talent. They've got to figure out what to do with the current talent. So, but what a great match that was. Ricochet also deserves to be on the main roster eventually. Obviously, a lot of these guys deserve to be on the main roster eventually. But that match was a really solid match. Two guys that on from that NXT TakeOver show who've had the 3 best matches of the year in WWE this year so far. Tommaso Ciampa and Johnny Gargano. Boy, they've had 3 matches now in this series, and it's going to continue. And they again stole the show on Saturday night. We knew that the case, though. This time it was for the NXT title, which I just love the fact that this is now what the brand is booked on, and will be probably 1 or 2 more times. Next couple takeovers maybe are going to be based on this feud. And we saw another match. I guess this was a last man standing match. Whatever the stip is, they make it work for them. And Ciampa gets the win again. Gargano, poor Gargano. I mean, it's feeling for his sake like a Daniel Bryan type thing. He's always left just on the outside looking in as far as NXT title. So when he finally does win, which he will, it's going to be awesome for the fans when he finally gets that comeuppance over Ciampa. He did get a win early in his series, but now that the title's at stake, and he's been challenging for the title for a while now, since before Ciampa got it, it's going to be something that, again, it's going to be a payoff for the fans, investing themselves into the emotion of this. But in the meantime, for these two guys individually, so I'm talking about from the storyline perspective, fans, yeah, we're invested, and we can't wait till Gargano finally wins the belt. But sadly, I think that this is sort of the zenith for these two guys as far as their WWE careers are concerned. Because, man, I mean, as awesome as this is, there's no chance that they could ever have it this good at the main roster. One, I didn't write this in the column I wrote about this topic this week, but they're small guys, and I know, WWE is giving more opportunities to small guys. AJ Styles has been the champion on SmackDown for a good while now, off and on for the last couple of years. That's been his show. He is the brand right now, and that's awesome for him and for fans. SmackDown has become the brand for the smaller guys to stand out, the guys who can work to stand out, not just the big guys who stand there looking good, but guys who can really work in the ring. Finn Balor had a brief. I mean, he was elevated. He was going to be the Universal Champion until he got injured, and he was given that opportunity, and he had a chance. That obviously there would have been a plan for him to run with the ball for a while there, and that would have been great. On the Raw brand too, Vince's pet brand. So it's not entirely the case that just because they're small guys that won't work out, but it's a small guy thing in part, and also, they work so well together. It's almost like you can get typecast, right? Think about, oh gosh, anybody. Think about this. I'm a big fan of the show Seinfeld. I just bought tickets this morning. Jerry Seinfeld is going to do a stand-up in Richmond in November. Just bought tickets for that this morning. But Seinfeld, great. But if you're Kramer, if you're George Costanza, if you're, Julia Louis-Dreyfus has done well in her career post with the show Veep, that multi-award winning show Veep. But, Jason Alexander and Michael Richards really never recovered, if you want to say. I mean, they're cashing lots of paychecks from those residuals, but, they've really had nothing meaningful in their post-Seinfeld careers. You could say the same thing about the Friends actors. I can imagine this will be the case for the Big Bang Theory folks. I mean, you get typecast with, you were good at that. You're Phoebe. You were Joey on Friends, or you're Kramer on Seinfeld. And that's what you're going to be for the rest of your life. Ciampa and Gargano, they might end up having a hard time not being Ciampa versus Gargano. It's hard to see if one of them gets called up or both get called up to the main roster. If they're not going to be called up to the same main roster, I'd imagine. And I think, I hate to say this about Gargano, I think Ciampa's got the better future of the two at the main level because, boy, you talk about a guy who's over. I love the fact that WWE did this, NXT did this, that I guess Triple H did this, St. Paul, I guess he's trying to call himself now. That's funny. But when Ciampa came back from the knee injury, after turning on Gargano, but he turned on Gargano after, the whole plan was to have that turn, and then the match where he turns, the tag team match where he turns, he tore his ACL, so we had to delay that for 8 months, which maybe in hindsight was great. It kept us, and that allowed Gargano to go and work himself into the title picture, fall short a couple of times, etc., etc. A storyline that they didn't play out for Roderick Strong, and then turned Roddy a heel. But Ciampa comes back and no music, and at that takeover where he came back with comes out no entrance music, and there's 16,000 people booing him. This is the kind of heat. When you listen to, I love listening to the Jim Cornette Experience podcast each week. And Jim loves talking about those old guys back in the 70s and 80s when he with the Midnight Express, for example, when they left arenas after shows, they had to have protection. I mean, they had fans wanting to flip their cars over. They were had such heel heat. And since we've all become smart to the business, or most of us become smart to the business, we boo, but we're kind of in on the act. Ciampa's got that 80s style heel heat. He's got people who want to flip his car over in the parking lot when the match is over. He's got people who want to swing a chair. My grandfather, famously, I've talked about this. I wrote about this in the book I wrote on wrestling. My grandfather back in the 70s got banned from our local monthly show at the venue we went to because he swung a chair at a heel. Got in. That fans used to get into it that much. Ciampa is the only guy that I know of right now in all of pro wrestling who has that kind of heat with fans that you legitimately want him hurt. Outside of, we know this is all of work and all this kind of stuff, fans dislike Ciampa that much. That is over. He is over more than anybody else is over. If he can maintain that, if WWE can maintain that for him at the main roster, boy, he's got a future. Gargano, and both these guys are excellent technical wrestlers. They both got aerial skills, ground skills, etc. Gargano he's a face, and I don't know that as much as we hate Ciampa, I don't know that we love Gargano that much. On the flip side, I think he gets a run with the NXT belt. He eventually does get elevated to the main roster, but I don't think he's ever more than a low mid card guy at the mid roster at the next roster. And I think Ciampa's got a chance to be a guy who can work his way up the ladder. SmackDown. I think Adam Cole should work a program with Nakamura. I can eventually see him doing a couple of months of a back and forth with AJ Styles. I think Ciampa could be a guy if they play this right, he could be a guy that could work a program with Styles for a few months, kind of like we're seeing right now, or going to see right now with Samoa Joe. Could. I'm afraid it could be all downhill from here for these two guys, but boy, I'd love to see it if Ciampa would get a chance to play that out a little further. So, but a lot of stuff to talk about there. Now I guess I'll start wrapping up this podcast. It's been a lot of fun talking wrestling to the depth we have. If you have any questions, comments, suggestions for me, email me, AugustaFreePress2@gmail.com. You can tweet at me, at Auga Free Press, AUG Free Press. Facebook message. Our Facebook page has a lot of fans, so go to Augusta Free Press on Facebook. Lots of ways. And basically, if you go to our website, if you're listening to this on podcast, obviously you are. If you're listening to this through the podcast app, just go to the Augusta Free Press website. My contact info is all over that site. You could not miss me. As far as that goes. Yeah, we'll wrap up for now. I'll talk about how we're going to talk All In next week on our show here. Looking ahead to that indie show that's going to have 10,000 plus fans, which is awesome for pro wrestling. I've been an indie promoter before, we had our best show. We had 1,900 people at a local show, a loaded local show, but this is a loaded local show, obviously a loaded show with now TV component too, or internet TV component through the Fight app. But we'll talk some All In next week and get ready for that. Use that as an opportunity to talk some New Japan as well. Since New Japan, ROH are providing a lot of talent for this show, obviously, with the fact that it's being booked by Cody and the Young Bucks. But we'll scan the world of wrestling podcasts, at least the ones that I monitor, and talk about some of the issues of the day coming up from those. But yeah, again, if you want to have some impact on this podcast, on my writing about wrestling, again, email me, please. Email me, tweet me, Facebook me, whatever the case may be. I'd love to hear from you. So, signing off for this podcast, I am Chris Graham. Thanks for listening.